forward to our next session. Bear with me, we have 4 speakers. So the next session is called New Business Models for a Digital Circular Economy. And with me here, coming up on stage right now, we have Benjamin Hein. He's the head of business development, circular economy at DIN, the German Institute for Standardisation. Christian Schiller, he's the co-founder and CEO of Surplus GmbH. Dr. Patrick Bergmann, managing director at Madaster, Germany. And Jörg Walden, founder and advisory board member at iPoint-systems, or ePoint, perhaps, GmbH. Welcome to the stage.
Der Bass ist auf jeden Fall da.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And I'd like to welcome you to our session, Digital Circular Economy. And let me start with raw materials. Raw materials used to be scarce and they're becoming rare now. Numerous industries are going to be affected. And that is exactly why we need to move away from the old pattern. Now, if you look into digitalisation, we're speaking about rare earths and platinum, which is quite important for the entire digitization because it's a contact material. And this is not looking very promising from a European perspective, which is exactly why we have to get rid of the old traditional linear economy, and we have to move towards a circular economy. And this is actually what the Green Deal is about. We want to get into a circular economy to reduce the resource pressure. And what we really want to do, we want to have products, today's products, that become tomorrow's raw materials. Now, if we think in cycles, interfaces will arise and they need to be defined. And this is where standards come into play. Let me give you one example. The designer manufacturer requires specified material for, for high quality products. And the recycler requires recyclable products from the designer. Sounds complicated? Yes, it is, but digital tools will help. And in fact, what we see at the moment is that we have value networks that are enabled by digital networks, which means that a sustainable vision of the product passport is becoming a reality, a vision that is requiring standards. Now, let's start with the problems first. We have industry espionage, we have sabotage, and we have the digital dinosaurs. The digital dinosaurs are quite common among the small, medium-sized companies. Big problems, we have to face them, and believe it or not, but standards help. Now, I want to get back to this digital network I was talking about. And this digital network is going to work a lot better if we use standards. What we need is data input, and that requires standardized data quality. It also requires data exchange and standardized data formats for efficient processes. In the first place, we, of course, need the standards for the comparability reasons. And then we need standardized identifiers for trust and traceability. Now, you see, standards do help, and standards are way more than just an A4 paper. What I want you to take away from this session today, at least from my speech, is that standards is much more than just containers, A4 papers. It's blockchain, it's artificial intelligence, it's also the QR code. Now, finally, what is most important to me is that what we define today in the standardization world and circularity standards is most likely to define the way we use our secondary raw materials for many generations to come. Thank you very much for listening, and I suppose we continue with the next talk.
Let's see.
Go on.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Patrick from Madaster, and I want to stress what Benjamin said, that waiting and patience is not an option. If we continue living as we live now, we have to make sure and realize that we have only one Earth. And that means we have only these limited amount of resources that is on this planet. And I want to talk about one specific sector. It's real estate and construction. We are responsible for around 1/3 of the overall waste in construction and real estate, and we are responsible for around 40% of the CO2 emissions. So that's a big elephant in the room when we talk about CO2 emissions and sustainable development goals. And for us, there's also only one option to get this whole system changed via a circular economy. And in real estate, we talk about a lot of stakeholders. We talk about very long lifespans, about several transactions within these 50, 80 years. That was the moment to say, we need to give materials, we need to give products an identity. How are we doing this with the humans, with the passport? You mentioned it. So for us, it's important that also buildings get a passport, that we know what is in the building, where, and how much of it. The tricky part is now how to store this over the long lifespan. This is the moment when we said, there's a governmental cadastre about the ground that we own. We also need a cadastre for materials, not at the owner of the materials, not in your folder, in your Excel sheet, but in the cloud. And the access to this information to a certain building is changing with the owner of the building. And like this, we make the material available and also the information. We call it Madaster. You see, material, cadastre, combines to Madaster. It's a digital library. We use BIM, so digital planning as an input. And we can do some analysis regarding CO2, circularity, but also the value of the materials. It's already active in 6 countries. Unfortunately, the Dutch guys were faster than us, so we adapted it, and it's in other countries with also large players that understood this. But it's also obvious that we need some kind of regulation with this regarding standards. So what is a building passport? Is it just some products? Do we need to consider the entire building from the ceiling to the cellar? Do we collect products? So there is still some room for improvement, similar to CO2 emissions, especially if we talk about several countries. And last but not least, what is circularity at the end in terms of products and materials? So how do we calculate all these measures? And therefore, we are also part of the Dean to get their grip on these definitions, because only if we know what we are talking about, we can measure it, and then we can report about it. And our vision is that we then come to a moment where buildings are not just disposal or waste, but where buildings are material banks, so where we know we store temporarily our materials, we know what is in there, and we can use it in the future. Thank you very much.
Next. Me? I think you're next.
Was it? Yeah. looks like me. Okay, very well. Welcome also from my side. My name is Jörg Walden, ex-CEO, now board member, iPoint-systems. iPoint-systems is working in the automotive area, electronic area, manufacturing area, and building systems still more than 20 years now, looking about compliance, sustainability, and other aspects. I want to start with this slide. We are in the digital conference here. Why are we starting with USB? And why do we need standards in USB? I think everybody knows, and everybody here, specifically in my age, knows how horrible it is if we have multiple of devices, multiple of electronic power devices connecting to everything. It's just a mess. Now it took years to get this into a standard. It took years now, even Apple now is accepting the standard, moving to a multiple device interface. And it's not just electricity what we are transferring here. We're transferring a lot of other things and data in one cable, saving a lot of resources, saving a lot of energy. Standard makes it possible. Why don't we think the same way in IT? IT has the big advantage that it has zero hidden entry point. You can just make a company from now. One day later, you're active in the cloud. You can produce a wonderful software. A lot of innovations everywhere in the world brings us forward an escalating speed. And this makes the world extremely complex. So many ideas, so many visions, so many good things. How can we bring things together? A supply chain is extremely complex. A car, 1.5 million, substance nodes, 15, 20 layers of suppliers. So we have to normalize them, we have to bring them together. What we see here is, we heard it about in two ways now, is bringing them together means not only the different players of the organization, one body is responsible for ERP data, production data, supply chain data, design data. Talk to a designer and ask him, what is at the end of your product life cycle? What is going on with your material? He will laugh at you. I'm just designing this wonderful new thing. Why should I think about waste and how to make it better for waste, how to optimize it for waste? So it's a mindset change what we need to do. And for this, we need not only people communicating, system. We need to communicate over multiple layers here. And I think this is the biggest challenge then. Thinking about multiple layers, thinking about multiple aspects, recyclability, carbon footprint, social impact, waste, water, and everything, and the rare earths in the world. This is a big challenge what we have to manage here. And there are some regulations, some standards, some systems where we see quite good success, but it takes years, 20 years to come. How many years we had? We heard 15 years? We need to be ready with everything. How can we transform legacy system in 50 years into this new world, new agile world, maybe with web services and more interoperability? So thinking about this now, as a good example here, we heard about this in the area of buildings. We have product passports. There's also a law now for batteries. Everybody wants to drive electric vehicles, but where is the battery? Where is the resources coming? And there's laws now even putting recyclability, mandatory recyclability materials into new products. So it's not just buying something from everywhere. I mean, we feel how resilient industries are today. You have to get recycled materials in the future. And this is only possible with product passport if you are connecting systems, if you're connecting ideas and bringing interoperability between the infrastructure. At this point, I want to thank you for the time, and every question are welcome. Thank you.
Now, I can take you down the road of plastics. Let's face it, the world is drowning in plastics. We have more than 15 million tons of plastic waste entering the oceans now every year. And as of this year, we also know it is already in all of our bloodstreams. Why is it that we recycle so little and waste so much? It's because we live in a world where virgin plastic is cheaper than recycled plastics. Why is that? It is actually really hard to buy recycled plastics. Why is that? Because we talk about fragmented markets where it's hard to secure consistent quality and quantity. And market actors are real digital dinosaurs, still using phones and fax machines to do business in the industry of plastic and waste. Which is why I founded Surplus as a global marketplace for circular plastics to make it really easy, cost-efficient, and transparent to buy and sell recycled plastics worldwide. Now, we connect waste owners with recyclers and the brands to make it easier for the brands to put recycled plastics back into their product and give the plastic waste a second life. In other words, what are we doing? We're bringing order into chaos through standards and the whole tool sets of modern B2B marketplaces. Standards was so fundamental to what we're doing because when you talk about secondary resources, the main thing that buyers like the Procter & Gamble's and Henkel's and BMW's have is can I really trust that this material will hold what it promises? Which is why we've built the world's first standard for high-quality recycling together with the DIN, the 91446 DIN spec. We'll hear about it maybe later a bit. But what this really means is actually building a neural network of the circular plastics economy. If we're never going to be able to put a rubble of waste back into a global supply chain if we don't connect the dots, and that's exactly what we do. It's not just a vision in my head. We've been at it for the last 3.5 years, have raised more than 4.5 million euro capital. When I did send my PowerPoint, it was a different format. See, it's a bit shitty design now, but excuse me on that. But we did raise 4.5 million euros from leading climate tech investors and are present already in more than 100 countries. And that global scale is actually necessary because once fully rolled out, Surplus will have not just one, but two sustainability effects. Number one, we're actually reducing CO2 emissions by up to 80% when you replace a ton of virgin plastic with a ton of recycled plastics. People only think of pollution when they think about recycling, but actually that's a huge lever of what we're doing. And number two, we're actually stopping plastic pollution, because once you give waste owners around the world an incentive to recycle more and better and keep the waste out of the environment and out of our bloodstream, we have actually solved the plastic pollution problem. Easier said than done, but we're at it. Thank you for your attention and happy for your questions.
Thank you so much. You're very good at the timing. 4 people keeping it. Amazing. I can tell you, you had a good rehearsal. So we have a mic that can go around as we have a very full room to make sure we hear you. Does anyone have questions? I see a hand over there. The mic's getting to you in 1 second. Or 2 hands, actually, very close to each other.
Thank you for great presentations. I have a question to Surplus. We are in the IT industry, and I was just thinking, is there a similar marketplace, or are you having plans to extend this marketplace from plastics also to raw materials?
And raw materials meaning?
Platinum, everything you need for producing IT systems.
Actually, we started out 3.5 years ago as a global marketplace for recycled materials, but quickly we realized as a startup you have to focus, and plastic is already a huge market. So what you see out there, there's a couple of B2B marketplaces that try to do what we do for metals, for paper, glass, etc. And I would project that they will first try to become big in themselves, and later maybe it makes sense to merge them, but it's still such a different ballpark to buy plastic than to buy metals that it didn't make sense to defocus and try to do everything at the same time, because that's when you surely die as a startup.
Thank you.
I think there was someone else pretty... Yes.
Thank you very much. I would like to touch on the first point you made, the first keynote about standardization and standards. So I work for a logistics company builder, Beam, here in Berlin, and I work in problem research, and we've run several problem validations concerning, things like data democratization in the space of logistics and supply chain. And just what you said, right? It's a conservative industry. People don't like sharing sensible data. And we've had this roadblock several times now, and it sort of seems to become a pattern, like a problem pattern. And my question would be, do you think there's an approach that could work in terms of creating those standards which are needed to, sort of clean up the messy interfaces outside of the public policy approach? Because for me, it seems to become clearer and clearer that outside the public policy approach, it's incredibly difficult, at least for German Mittelstand.
Absolutely. Yeah. I suppose the question was in my direction, and it was exactly the same situation as Christian was starting 2 years ago. There was nothing, and in fact the industry wasn't really keen on getting the standard. He was really setting and then paving the path for actually data exchange. So what I'd like to encourage you to do, you get in touch with me. We look into it and we make it possible. If there's a standard, we revise it. If it hinders, if there's a standard missing, let's start a project. So let's have a chat afterwards. Thanks for bringing this up.
Okay, maybe this last question here at the front.
Hi. For me, the most interesting slide was the first one, or the second one, with the circles and who's getting all the materials. It's China, so the majority. So my question is China on board? When you do the standards, etc., are you talking with them as well?
I think that goes also in Jörg's direction. Maybe we can split the answer. So, of course, where we get all the resources from, mainly is China, also South Africa. Platinum, 75% is from South Africa, but also from Canada and from Russia. It's split into half. But what I'm trying to introduce is that what we need to do is we need to close the circle. We're having all the materials here, and this is what we need to establish. And this is where all the interfaces came into play. This is where we need the product passport, and this is where we desperately need the standards that has been brought so much forward and onto us. But maybe Jörg, because he's looking into this as well, he can explain about this a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, I mean, there is. Specifically in material compliance and other areas, you see some standards what are similar between Europe and China, where China starts following our direction and they are really pushing into a sustainability direction. But I think it goes a little bit in the same point. There's a lot of burden between intellectual property, sharing data specifically to China, anonymizing data with chokers and other criteria that you don't have the full ingredients, so additives and stuff like this, and then the value of the data is really, really low. And this is exactly the question. So how do you connect organizations, keeping the intellectual property in-house, but still having enough information that you can make your assumptions about ingredients, additives, and other stuff like this? And there are some synergies and platforms in the moment who are trying to get this with a little bit blockchain and other approaches, keeping the people and the data secure and trying to get the trust in the data even over borders like China. Yeah, that's starting working, yeah, but slowly.
Yeah, so we have no more time for questions here, but can you just quickly say where can people find you during Hub? You know, if they want to talk to you later, are you, I don't know, is there a place? Do you have a spot, a stand?
I heard there's a speaker area, a lounge.
Yeah.
We are here around in a co-working space. Just come up to us. We're happy to talk to you if you have any more questions.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.